So hi guys, welcome back to Overtime Heroics MMA. I'm Martin Hamilton and today I'm joined by Jill McCulloch, owner and head striking coach of New Life Gym. How are you doing? See, I got them both in there.
Thank you for thanks for having me on.
No, it's a pleasure. This is part of our coaches segment on YouTube. It was an idea that myself and I can't remember his title, but like the head of Overtime Heroics MMA, Lewis Simpson, it was an idea that we kind of had together to like, we wanted to speak more to coaches as well as fighters to see that side of MMA, especially with coronavirus and how coaches have adapted to this new world, this new world we're living in.
Definitely, it's definitely been a bit of a shock to the system for everyone.
So I'll start this interview like how I like to start every interview. So do you want to just tell us how you get involved in martial arts and how your martial arts journey began?
Yeah, so it's a bit all over the place, to be honest. Like, I think like most people that you probably interview, I started when I was younger as a kid. Like, I was always involved in like karate and stuff like that. But I grew up kind of around it. So my dad was a fighter. And my grandfather had been a boxer. So there was always a kind of influence within the family. And then I fell away from it. You know, as you do, like typical kid, typical teenager. I fell away from it for a bit. And then I was training on and off throughout my kind of late teens, early 20s. And then I would say I came back to it properly around about, oh God, I'm showing my age now, kind of mid-20s, early to mid-20s. And then through that journey, obviously, I met my husband, David, who at the time was an active pro MMA fighter. And then it just kind of blossomed from there again. So next thing I know, I was managing a gym and owning a gym, and suddenly I didn't work full time anymore. Well, I did, but I worked in my gym now. Like, I had a career in finance. I've worked in finance since I was 16, so for a while I was juggling both the gym and finance, and then I moved fully over to the gym. So it's been it had its time away from it, but then when I came back to it properly, it was like full immersion. Like 24/7, eat, sleep, breathe, work, everything to do with martial arts. Not just in the coaching side, but obviously training and stuff as well. So yeah, quite intense.
So I was just thinking of that there, because like working in finance, that's not a very stable, usually very well paying job. Like how did you explain that to maybe your family that didn't fully understand martial arts and your friends, that you're going to go away for this like comfortable job and you're going to open a gym in the middle of Mary Hill?
So my story's a wee bit different in that sense, I guess. So yeah, I started working really young, and I was working full time by the time I was 16, 17 in finance. And I did that consistently. It's a funny one because I've always been quite good with numbers, in the sense that I'm really good with patterns and stuff like that. And I got a job, and I was working for a stockbrokers for a long time. And as you say, it was stable, it was good money, certainly more money than I earn now. It was long hours though, and it was pretty intense, especially towards the end of my career there. It was a pretty intense situation. But actually, part of the reason that I kind of took the big jump for it, as I say, for a long time, I was doing both the gym and working full time. Initially, the gym was actually in Anderson, kind of Charing Cross area. It was our first unit. It was a lot smaller than this one. And we were there for 3 years. And I would say for the first kind of year and a half, 2 years of that, I was working full time as well. But actually, unfortunately, I was really not very well. So I was going through a really difficult transitional period in my life. Essentially, I've spoken about this a lot. I speak about it quite publicly, but I know I have quite chronic OCD. But at the time, I didn't know that's what I had. I just thought I was mental, for want of a better word. So I was going through quite a transitional time where I wasn't keeping well mentally at all. And for anyone that knows anything about OCD, left untreated, it kind of mushrooms. Like it morphs and it changes and it doubles all the time, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And unfortunately, despite having had it, they reckon, since I was like a young child, it'd always kind of been like misdiagnosed with like anxiety and panic disorder and health anxiety and stuff. And these things certainly describe some of the symptoms, but they weren't like the root cause, and I knew that. And then at this time, working for stockbrokers, I had a great job. I really enjoyed it, but it was like stressful. I was basically a troubleshooter. That's what I call it. I was like a troubleshooter basically. Because as I say, I've got a kind of natural flair for like patterns and like finding fault with things and like foreseeing issues and plugging them and stuff. And I took really, really, really unwell, and my OCD kind of came to a head, and it was round about that time that I was actually diagnosed. And I'll never forget it. Like, I'm the type of person where, like, when I'm in something, like I'm trying to balance both. And I remember Davey sitting me down, and he basically sat me down, and he was like, he begged me, he was like, look, please stop. He's like, I need like a safe environment for you, like, because I was in a really, really bad place, and I loved my work. But interestingly enough, because of the type of work I was doing, it sounds silly, but I was going to work and I was exercising all those kind of bad habits that OCD gives you. So because it was troubleshooting, so I'm quite proficient at that, but I'm proficient at it because of OCD behaviour. So it was like a double-edged sword. Yes, I was sorry, sorry dog. Yeah, I'm really enough. Thanks. I am really proficient at it, but try, go to bed, go on, bed. Sorry.
By the way.
So I was really proficient at it. So basically, it was a double-edged sword. Yeah, I was good at it, but at the same time, I was like just continually damaging my mental health by exercising those sort of habits. And it actually got to the point where I couldn't work for anyone. So for about 6 months, I was seriously unwell, like really unwell. It was a really, really low time in my life. I was just in a really, really bad place, and I kind of just made the jump. Like it was kind of do or die. My OCD was so bad that I couldn't actually deal with being in stockbrokers as much as I loved it. And the only place that I ever felt, this is going to sound daft, but the only place that I felt safe was in the house or in the gym. Like it was like a wee safety cocoon, and I could be in there and I could manage that environment and I could be comfortable whilst I got to the bottom of what was going on and got my treatment and stuff like that. So yeah, I think the actual jump to full time with the business, with the gym, was kind of a wee bit more of a push rather than a jump initially. Yeah. It would always have came, but it was the right time. And I think with regards to like talking to people and understanding, I think I'm really lucky. Like, my family are dead supportive. Like, I always have been the type of person. I'm quite strong-willed. I'm like, right, okay, I'm doing my own thing here. So they're really supportive in that way. So they were just like, as long as you're happy and you're comfortable and like you're doing well. And obviously lots of people with their reservations, they were like, don't work full time with your husband, like it's a pure recipe for disaster. And at that time we weren't even married, do you know what I mean? Like, and yeah, it just fitted. It fitted, and I've never looked back. Like I couldn't imagine now waking up at 6 a.m. and going to an office, and like as much as I enjoyed that period of my life, I would never go back to it. Like I'm done with that. Like this is a lot more fulfilling. Like you're in control. You're in control of what's happening for you. But I'm also, one of the big things with like working for kind of corporate world is there's limitation on you. There's only so much you can do for people. Like there's only so far I can go to like help someone or like be involved with them. Whereas in here, like I get to make that judgment call, and I find that side of it really rewarding. So yeah, a bit of a different approach to it, I guess. But I'm glad I did that.
Because you mentioned there as well that the gym was one of the only places that you felt safe, like, out with your own home. Like, what can you attribute that to? Like, why you felt so safe at that gym? Was it the working out and releasing endorphins, or was it just the environment created?
I think a wee bit of both. Like, so with regards to anxiety disorders and combat sports, there's been really interesting studies done over the years. So you'll see like a lot of people advertise like, oh, boxing, for example, is really good for managing your stress. Or you'll hear fighters say, training keeps my mental health on the straight and narrow. I feel a lot more relaxed once I've sparred and stuff. There's actually science behind that. So they done I think it was one of the big universities in America, and they done this clinical study. And it was over the space of a couple of years, and it was jiu-jitsu players, right? And they took army veterans, so army vets with post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So basically their anxiety level is like switched on to like 1,000,000 all day, every day. And what happens when someone's like that is they'll try and shield away. So they'll try and shield away so that they don't activate that side of their brain. So they'll try and stay like nice and shielded away and quite reclusive and stuff, or maybe like turn to other things to deal with it. So they took these army vets, all who had PTSD, some had complex PTSD, and they taught them jiu-jitsu, right? And you would think, wait a minute, for someone who has been traumatized, right, you're going to put them in a close combat sport where the goal is to either hyperextend the joints or choke someone out, right? It's as gruesome as you're going to get. Do you know what I mean? I know they call it the gentle art and all that, but like realistically, but actually what they found is that the veterans' PTSD levels decreased massively, right? So that they began to be able to cope a lot more. And basically the reason for it was that they were getting exposure to all your like adrenaline-based hormones, right? So you were getting like your adrenaline and all that kind of stuff coming through, right? But it was in short, controlled bursts. And what it did was it actually increased their tolerance again to having those hormones and the subsequent emotions that came with it. They weren't immersed in it. As I say, it was like 3-minute rounds and then we reset, 3-minute rounds, reset, whatever. And basically, part of the reason for it, part of the reason for that working so well is when, even though you're training, right, and you know, say me and you're rolling, right, you know I'm not going to whap on an armbar and try and snap your arm, right? You know that, you know we're drilling. If I'm sparring, that person knows I'm not trying to hurt them. Like I'm out here working my game. But on a subconscious level, your body can only react to this feels like a fight. It looks like a fight, it walks like a fight, and it talks like a fight. So I'm going to react as if this is a fight. So what happens is your body releases all the relevant hormones that you would get in an actual fight. But because you know consciously this is a safe environment, it's controlled, you're able to then sort of like ratify almost those hormones on a subconscious level, and it increases your tolerance again to them. And then obviously once somebody's finished, you know yourself, right? When you've had a fight or you've maybe been in a fight or whatever it is, after it you get the adrenaline dump, and then you get that kind of like elation, like that kind of brief, like, oh, right, okay, good job, that's that done. So you're getting like your serotonin. So that's your body's way of saying, right, good job, you survived. And then you get that, right, okay, actually, I need to go and calm down, and I want to feel very calm and like safe and maybe a bit tired. So that's like your oxytocin coming through. So that's like that's like your soothing hormone. So like every time you go into drilling or sparring or anything that evokes that adrenaline, you go through that cycle, and it goes well to help them kind of like manage those hormones again. So it was a really, really cool study. I'll try and get the link for you. It was an American. It's really interesting. And I don't know if you've noticed, like when you go into doctor's surgery now, like some doctor's surgeries actually prescribe martial arts. I don't know if you've seen this.
Right. Oh,
so yeah. So in Scotland, there's I know my doctor's surgery does it down in Finnieston in Glasgow. But it's called like social prescriptions, right? And basically they'll be in like cahoots with a club, like the NHS. I love that partnership with a club, and rather than getting, or maybe in addition to medication, they'll prescribe you like a membership to a martial arts club. And part of it comes from these kind of findings about how the hormones work whenever you're like sparring, etc. So it's really, really interesting. So I think on a scientific level, that's probably what's happening. That's probably why I feel so safe. Sparring training is the number one thing that keeps my OCD under control. Like, it is the number one thing. I'm medicated, and I always will be. I'm at peace with that now. Like, it's pretty chronic. As I say, they reckon I've had it since I was like 4 or something.
Yeah.
And I'm now 33, so I'm long in the tooth with it. Certainly the diagnosis didn't come till later. But training definitely like keeps me on the straight and narrow with that 100%, and I would assume it's for those kind of reasons. So that, knowing that I can manage my OCD instantly kind of helps to calm me down. Environment wise for the gym, yeah, 100%. Like, obviously this is just like my home away from home, you know what I mean? It's like my second house, my second very expensive house. So, I think just being in a positive environment, and I was quite, at that time, I was quite clearly ill. Like you didn't need to know me to know that I was ill. Like I was very underweight. I think I was like 59 kilo, and I'm like 6 foot tall. So I was really, really, really skin and bone. Like I'm at a good healthy walking weight just now, and that's about 80 kilo for me. Yeah. So say I'm 6 foot tall. So yeah, so I think at that time, like, I was quite clearly ill, and I felt safe enough to be in there and be a wee bit open about it, and certainly not burden anyone and be like, oh, by the way, I'm pure ill. But if somebody did ask, I could go, do you know what, like, this is what's happening. And the team round about me were really good. And when I did get back to coaching, like, it was a long journey, like, to get to where I am today with OCD. And when I did get back to that, like, the team round about me were great, because if I was having quite a bad day, like, I'd be able to confide in them and go, listen, I'm having a really tough day today, like, and they'd be like, right, you're cool, and they kind of helped me through it. So I think I needed that additional base to help get me back into a routine of actually living, because otherwise I would have never left the house. And what good's that to anyone? Do you know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And I think that's where your name, like the name of like the name of the gym, becomes so unique, because like the term like new life, especially to me, that kind of epitomizes everything like martial arts should be. It doesn't matter if you're 9 years old, or it doesn't matter if you're 89 years old. If you want to make a adaptation of some sort into your life, the martial arts is the way to go about it, and it can help provide you a new life. So with that in mind, like, how was it that gym got the name, and how did it kind of get started?
So the gym was actually named by David. So he's also got a really interesting story. The two of us have quite similar stories in some ways. but David, he's quite open about it, but he basically went through, he had quite a difficult upbringing, to be completely honest with you. And he went through a really challenging event when he was 18. He nearly lost his life in an attack. And he was training by this time and stuff like that. He was training there, and like he was just about to go pro, I think. He's trained since he was like 7, like, and by this time he was just about to go pro, or aspiring to go pro. And unfortunately ended up in a situation where, when I say he nearly lost his life, I mean like they had to reattach nerves in his neck. Like,
God.
I mean, he genuinely nearly lost his life. So he went through a really, really, really tough situation, a really, really low point. And not long after that, he ended up homeless as well. So he had a really, really tough part in a stage there where it was really difficult for him. So whenever he was deciding to actually establish the gym, so he initially kind of like managed another gym, kind of sublet effectively, back in Govan, over in Govan, and then for a while he also coached the kind of MMA side, the Glasgow Fitness out in Burnleybank, and he kind of had like his own brand within that, and I think that's where New Life was born. And when he decided to kind of take the plunge and get his own premises, when we took it down in Anderson, it was just, that was the obvious, like, that New Life branding. It's about the colours of the gym is black and green, and the green's supposed to represent like nature and rebirth and like regrowth and like new beginnings. Green's quite a positive colour. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's about new beginnings and stuff. And it's exactly that. It's like, for him, martial arts was a vehicle that he used to give him a new life. Because if it hadn't been for training, if it hadn't been for fighting, I can't honestly say that David would be here today. He was in quite a difficult path in his life, and it was never going to end very well. Martial arts gave him that vehicle to kind of turn it round about and make something of himself. And he's really fortunate. Like, now he's got a couple of businesses. Like, he's had a successful fighting career, he's had a successful coaching career. Like, but most importantly, like, he's been able to provide a safe space for other people to also go on that journey. So yeah, it just seemed like the kind of obvious fitting name, and we didn't want it to sound like too cage fighter either. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't want it to sound too. I think at the time, like, MMA has come on massively, like even in the last 5 years, like in the UK and Scotland especially, but certainly in the last 10 years. And we wanted it to be a very approachable gym that anyone could come to. Like, you don't have to be fit, you don't have to want to fight, you don't have to be muscly or male or whatever other stereotypes that you've got in your head. Like, we wanted it to feel quite a warm and welcoming environment. And I think part of that starts with the name as well. Like, I know certainly for me, when I was kind of bouncing about gym to gym, trying to find my home, like, that was part of it as well for me. Like, you can easily get inside your own head and have these ideas of what somewhere might be like. And 99.9% of the time, they're not like that. It's just it's your imagination. So we wanted to kind of make sure that message was out there as well, that like it is open. So New Life, and people always ask me, they're like, it's not very MMA based, so I sometimes put MMA on the end, depending on the important.
I completely get what you're saying there, but a gym called New Life, it seems far more appealing than, say, Lion's Den, for example, like Ken Shamrock's old gym. Like, I don't think you would get many kind of females walking into the Lion's Den. Like,
yeah,
name away would be a straight barrier, whereas New Life, it's that can appeal to anyone. And that kind of takes me right into my next question, like, quite nicely. It's as if we've pre-planned this. You provide like a lot of like women's only classes at New Life, and by the looks of it, they've been very successful. How important has this been to integrating women into the sport? Because as you said, there's a lot of misconceptions about martial arts gyms from every shape or form, that it is like kind of big, muscly, angry-looking guys with tattoos. Where when you walk into a martial arts gym, that's not the case at all. You see probably one, but one that built, and the rest are like the nicest people in your life.
100%. Like, it's something that, so I've been really fortunate throughout this journey, and I've been able to like train in some really amazing gyms over the UK, but also kind of all over the world. Like, and one of the places that really stuck out to me when I went was there was a wee Thai gym in Phuket called Chok Chai's. It's not there anymore. He's moved on, but he had his own wee gym just off the kind of Phuket strip, the soy strip, and it was so welcoming, like so super welcoming. It was nice and fresh, and one thing I noticed was that he actually had a couple of female trainers, and it totally just changed the dynamic for me. Do you know what I mean? Because I was like, oh, right, okay, especially in Thailand, where like it is very male dominated. Like, I mean, what, women aren't even allowed in Lumpini, do you know what I mean? That's changing soon, but like, it's very, you know, women have to go under the bottom of the ropes in order to not like curse the ring and things like that. Like, it's mad. Yeah, so when you're in Thailand, it depends where you go, but if you're in a very traditional gym and you're a female and they want you in the ring, they lift the bottom rope for you and you have to go under, whereas guys go over the top. And in some gyms as well, like, there's rings that women are just not allowed in. Like, just not allowed in that ring. And it's to do with, so they have like these amulets that, obviously Thailand's quite a spiritual place, and there's a lot of like kind of spiritual beliefs within Muay Thai itself, but they've got like these amulets, and like, it's to make sure that like they basically provide like blessings to the ring and stuff. And when you've got your Mongkol on, and if you go over that and you're a woman, it's like it can cause cursing basically. So it's kind of mad. So that was a big thing for me. And at the time, I had just started New Life Ladies, probably about 6 months before, when I was out there training. And I felt firsthand what it was like having started that program and then going in as like a student and a visitor to someone else's gym, the positive effect it had on me. So I think there's a couple of reasons for it, right? First and foremostly, there was, when I was kind of bouncing about before I ended up kind of settled in meeting Davey and stuff like that, I was bouncing about, and you know, it's same thing. I'm like, even though I trained, I was like, oh, I'm awful nervous and I don't want to go, and like, you don't want to rely on a pal to come with you, but at the same time, like, you're quite nervous, and I wasn't the most socially confident, and I'm still not, to be honest with you. But I found that quite a difficult barrier, like going into a gym. And I did feel more comfortable when there was other women there, because I didn't feel like the kind of odd one out. So naturally you gravitate towards female classes, and that's great. But the problem that I had personally for me was that there was never really any more than maybe like one women's class a week. And I didn't want to train once a week. I wanted to train every day. So, and I knew that I would eventually get to the mixed classes, but I just needed that wee bit of extra confidence and that wee bit of like hand holding for a couple of weeks, couple of months, and I'd be able to make the jump. But when I did, then, so we had that issue, right? So maybe one at a very push, like 2 female classes. You would go along, and quite often it was still guy coaches, which is fine, right? Like, it doesn't matter, do you know what I mean? That never actually bothered me, but I could see how that would be a barrier, for example, for some people, maybe from a religious point of view. I've got ladies that train with me that wouldn't train in the class if it was a male coach, and it's quite simply because they can't remove their headdress in front of them.
Yeah,
and it's
of course.
Yeah, like they can't. So it's nothing personal. It's just that's not suitable for them. So that was kind of something that always stuck out to me. And then the other thing that I found difficult was, I think you probably hear other women say this, like I call it like, you know, you've heard of like the pink tax, haven't you? Like where pink things cost more. But they've got like, you can get a razor and a pink razor costs more than the blue razor, right? I kind of felt a wee bit like that when you went to some different, and I tried lots of different classes in clubs, but sometimes it felt a little bit like that, where it was like more boxercisey, which there's nothing wrong with, but for me that's not what I wanted. I wanted the sport. I wanted the sport of K1 or the sport of boxing, or to actually truly learn martial arts, as opposed to like just hitting a pad 20 times till I'm gassed, do you know what I mean, or not being taught technique. And that was an obvious like kind of gap in the market for me. So once I finally knuckled down and ended up where I was, it was something that I wanted to go back and kind of retrospectively address, because I knew there would be other women out there in that situation who want to train regularly, would prefer to train with a female coach if they can, and they're not just coming along solely for the purpose of like box fit or whatever. Like they actually want to learn the sport aspects. They want to get the shinies on. They want to learn drilling. Do you know what I mean? And usually it's with the idea of like moving into a mixed class. So that's kind of where the idea for New Life Ladies came from. And it started off 2 sessions a week, and we bumped it up to 3 before COVID. We were up to 4, but COVID's I've had to cut everything. I've had to give everything a haircut to make space so that we can have a maximum of like 10 people on the mats. So I started that, and it was a wee bit slow at first. I kind of knew it would be, because it was like getting that message out that look, this isn't like another kind of like box fit or boxercise class. Like it is a little bit different. Like you're coming, you're actually learning. Yes, there'll be some times that you come in here and you'll go out and you'll be knackered and you'll be blowing out your arse, but there's other times where you'll come in and it will be a more technical class. Like it'll be about footwork, it'll be about drilling, whatever it is. And I started at the old unit, so I've been here 4 years, and we're in the old unit 3 years. So it took a wee while to kind of like find its rhythm, but once it did, it really took off, and it branched out into things that I never even thought it would. Like, so I mentioned earlier on, like sometimes women face troubles with things like a headdress, for example, right? So it kind of branched out into like me ending up putting on, there was an Islamic school not far from the gym, and they contacted me, and I basically ended up doing a PE class for them, right? So they would come to the gym, so it was like 30 of them, and they would come to the gym for 3 hours, 2 hours on a Saturday, and it would be private. I'd put the blackout curtains across. It was a shop front at the time, so I'd put the blackout curtains across, be private, and all the girls could come in and take off their headdresses and not have to worry about like in case someone popped in, like a guy popped in or whatever. And obviously that's not something I've never had to deal with on a personal level, but for the first time I got to see how frustrating it is. And actually, so I had a lack of options, but there's people out there who have even less options. Do you know what I mean? And it's down to gender. So with that, we started doing that, and then when we moved into this gym, the bigger gym, by that time I actually had ladies who had come through. So the obvious one's going to be Annabelle. Annabelle's she's kind of assumed the kind of main coaching role for New Life Ladies now. So she started like very similar situation to me, bounced about between gyms, was trying to find a women's class. It was only once a week, all the rest of it. And she landed up with me, and Annabelle has been with me for 4.5 years now. And she's totally changed her life. Like, she came in and she wasn't in a very good place. She's very honest about it. And since then, like, she's totally changed her life. Like, she's just completed a degree in sports science. Obviously, she's now a fully qualified coach. She's an active fighter. Like, her whole life has changed, and she's actually assumed that kind of lead coach role for New Life Ladies, and that's where she started, was New Life Ladies. So she's like the true embodiment of it. Like, she's like, if I was to draw a character of it, it would be Annabelle. Like, that was kind of my vision. And yeah, she's at the extreme end of it, where she's changed her full life, but it just kind of goes to show you how far 4 hours a week can go for somebody. Do you know what I mean? Like, just carving out that space. So yeah, it's good, but I'm always looking at ways of improving it. Something that a couple of years ago I worked with a friend of mine, and I worked on, it was like a pride event. It's like a kind of dry pride event. So, and through it I learned a lot more about like trans. And so one of the things now that I say for New Life Ladies is it's open to anyone who identifies as female. So even making a space there, because there's someone else who's marginalised, right, okay, let's bring them in. Because I genuinely believe that martial arts should be accessible for everyone, like for everyone, regardless of any social construct in the background of it. It's really important to me that everyone has that access. So we opened that up and it was like, right, okay, so it's anyone who identifies as female, and that's been successful. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've had uptake on that as well. So it can always be improved. And then with that, obviously, that's bred quite a few fighters for me. So I've got, I would say, the balance in the gym here. So I've got 3 female coaches, right? Got 3 female coaches, including myself. I've got 4 or 5 female fighters, and then our recreational side of things is like a good 60-40 split. So I would say 60% male, 40% female, and that 40% female isn't just within the ladies' classes. I'm talking like a mixed class. Like, you want a mixed class and it's like a 60-40 split. But when I started with it, it was like we had like 1 or 2 females at any one time, and now it's obviously it helps having a female owner, but it's very, very balanced. So I think you're seeing more females coming through in the sport, and you're seeing more females getting to the level where they can be coaches and have that wee bit of influence and start to carve out those wee spaces that isn't, as I say, just kind of, here's your pink boxing gloves and try your hardest to hit me. Do you know what I mean? It's the actual sport. So yeah, that's kind of the story on Your Life Ladies.
Because those numbers are absolutely amazing. I don't know if there's many other gyms in the country that would have such a high percentage of women in the classes, and that's really amazing to hear, and it's amazing to see as well. Because you spoke about there, like, the kind of role of a coach and how your role kind of goes beyond teaching people martial arts. It's like teaching people life skills to a degree and altering your approach to suit their needs. So have you noticed, especially over the last year, that like the role, like during coronavirus times, have you noticed that the role of a coach is drifting away more from like teaching someone technique to more of a confidant? Like, especially when people weren't in the gym, you had to be like there for them in other ways.
100%, definitely. So I'm really glad you touched on that, actually, because it's something that I think most fight teams, if you speak to a fight team, they'll probably all say the same thing, themselves included. Like, your fight team is like your brothers in arms, innit? Like, they're your buddies, they're your family. Like, you're literally pushing each other to the extremes. You form really close bonds and stuff. And I think within the fight team, that's always existed. Like, we've always been very much, like, for example, like our fight team, the fight team in here call me their gym mum. So it kind of gives you like an indication. Like, the guys and the girls come to me with everything from like, we're going to a fight and I forgot my gum shield, to like, life decisions where, listen, I'm really not enjoying this college course and I'm considering this job, and what do you think? And that's common for us, and it always has been. Like, Davey and I both try to be kind of very open with the guys, because it's a two-way street as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a two-way street. It's important that you have that kind of human touch with people, because, as you say, like, coronavirus is an obvious one, right? It's totally threw a spanner in the works for everyone. But coronavirus is one thing. Like, people have been facing challenges and setbacks forever. It's just that we're all experiencing this big one together, and it's, in a way, it's positive because it's allowed people to, like, kind of open up and talk a wee bit more. As I mentioned earlier, obviously I have quite chronic OCD, so we always have a very kind of open door policy when it comes to being quite honest with each other. So I'm really fortunate that we've kind of managed to nurture that environment before the onset of COVID. It's something that we've always kind of tried to nurture within the gym. Like we always say to our fighters, like, see, whenever like, especially like when they're amateur and it's the first couple of fights, and especially if they're younger, they'll often be like, oh, I'm not scared. And I'm like, of course you are, you're human. And if you weren't scared, they'd be like, there's an issue here, do you know what I mean? And it's like that kind of leading by example. So Davey and I have always been big on that, like, kind of nurturing that sort of confident environment. But I think for the wider kind of general population, I think, yes, I think I've seen a lot more of people not just sharing with us, but sharing with each other, which has been really important as well. As I say, the guys, all our students, I'm saying the fight team, but all of our students in here know and do and have and will, I hope, continue to do so, come to me and Davey when they need help or when they need advice or as a sounding board or whatever it is. Like, it's not uncommon to have somebody for the gym, pre-COVID, but someone from the gym in our house on a Friday night, sitting down, having a cup of tea and going, right, here's what's happening, what should I do about this? Or that's pretty standard for us. I think one thing it's done for everyone is it's kind of banded like the wider team together. So it's really important to us that there's never a division between, see, when you're on the match, you're equal, right? I don't care if you're in a team and fight. Yes, you're at different journeys, but at the end of the day, like, you are both students and you deserve the same level of coaching, like, relevant to your abilities. But I think the kind of COVID situation, when everyone's ended up back on the mats together, like, they've ended up kind of like bonding with each other a bit more, and it's breaking down those barriers again. Like, oh, he's a fighter. Let's like, oh, actually, no, that's just Tommy. Do you know what I mean? Like, and Tommy's going, because it's gave us this kind of like communal thing that we're all having to battle, and it's affecting us all differently, but it's affecting us all similarly as well. So it's given the whole gym like something to kind of work through together, which is quite nice to see. But I think with that one, like, we kind of always have taken that role with our fighters, like that kind of confident side. But I do think it's, if anything, it's reinforced to me kind of how strong that bond is with us, and I'm really grateful for that, because they've helped us as well. Like, our students are the reason we're here. Like, it's not because like I've got some sort of mad business skills. It's because people have rallied round about, and as I said to you earlier before we started recording, that's in the wider community as well. So you're seeing like gyms who on paper, like, they're opposition, but just now, like, everyone's teammates. Like, it doesn't matter if that's gym, that gym, that gym. Like, right now we're all teammates because we're trying to get through this. And I think you've seen like kind of lines of communication open up between other gyms, and I know it has for us as well. And so it's definitely had its setbacks in the sense that, like, the physical training aspect of it, but I do genuinely believe that teams and gyms are going to come out the other end of this a lot stronger in terms of their bonding, because it's a war they've went through. Do you know what I mean? It's true adversity that people have gone through just now, and at the end of the day, like, none of us have been through it before. So unless you're from 1912, none of us have been through it before, you know what I mean? So it's a bit of a strange one, but we'll get there.
Have you noticed the actual, like, maybe not so much now because there is still restrictions in place, but have you noticed that the interest in your classes have went up a lot during lockdown?
Huge. Yeah, absolutely huge. So there's been a couple of things at play. So we've got a waiting list. We've had a waiting list since basically last year when they opened us in September. And to be completely honest with you, in terms of the adults, right, we've barely been able to take in, I think, literally like 1 or 2 new people. And when I say new, it's people who have trained with us before that have came back. Because obviously the space side of things is a big issue for people, because everyone needs to have a substantial amount of space between the next person, social distancing wise. We are fortunate in the sense we've got the 2 floors in the gym. It's quite a big unit. We've done an expansion as well. So during lockdown, we did a renovation to create more floor space. But unfortunately, it means with grappling and all that kind of stuff off the table and social distancing, like, no one else can get in at the moment. So it's completely stagnant. So the people who are in are not going anywhere. They're not leaving to the point where they're like, if they're not going to be in that night, they're texting you like, listen, man, I'll be back. And it's okay. I'm not going to give your space away. But we do have a substantial waiting list at the moment. I know other gyms locally have as well. I know the Grip House were saying the same thing as well, like substantial waiting lists. To be honest with you, I would imagine most teams are in the same boat at the moment. A couple of things with it, like, it's kind of like, yes, people are concerned about their fitness, etc. Like, obviously, one thing COVID has brought to the forefront for a lot of people is taking a step back and looking at their lifestyle and going, right, how can I improve on this? Because, yeah, okay, I probably would be fine if I got this, but at the same time, there's room to make improvement. And then there's other people who have contacted us, and it's like, actually, COVID has made me look at my lifestyle, and if I got COVID, I wouldn't be okay, and I need to change that. So you're seeing a lot of that coming through, and I think this is where the restrictions is very frustrating, because there's so many people out there that are trying to access martial arts, and as I've probably made quite clear, I don't see martial arts, for me, it's not a hobby, right? Well, it's my livelihood, but for a lot of people, they use it as a medicine, like it's a therapy, like that's what gets them through the day, that's what gets them through the week. And I mean, there you go, the doctors prescribe it, right? The doctors prescribe martial arts. It's kind of like a form of mindfulness. I call it like active mindfulness, because you're in the zone and that's all you're thinking about, right? Is whatever it is you're doing, if you're sparring, hit the bag, whatever. But people are trying to access that, and they're accessing it for a reason. Like, and I always say this as well, like, people don't just like come to fight gyms for no reason. Like, there's a reason. When people walk through that door, they might say to you, oh, I'm here because I want to learn jiu-jitsu, or I want to get fit, or whatever. But usually, I would say about 95% of the time, there's something bigger going on. Like, and it might be mental health, it might be a challenge in their life. Sometimes you don't get to know, like sometimes they don't tell you, sometimes they do. But more often than not, it's the same thing. It's they're choosing this as a vehicle to help them deal with whatever else is happening outside. And it's really sad that there's so many people just now looking to get access to that, and they can't. Like, they just can't. Like, there's not enough hours in the day. There's not enough space on the floor. It's one of those ones. So I think there's a wee bit of people have been doing a lot of soul searching recently and looking for ways to cope and stuff, because this will have brought a lot of like anxiety and challenges and stuff to the table for people. So they will be looking for coping mechanisms, and it's sad that this is a positive thing and it's so limited, whereas things that maybe aren't so positive are quite freely available. Do you know what I mean? There's a wee bit of an imbalance there in my opinion, but big influx. But hopefully once she gives us a green light for indoor contact sport, I should be able to start really making my way through that list. I just hope so. Fingers crossed.
Just, to come to like more of the kind of Scottish MMA scene, because as you were saying earlier, it is quite small in Scotland, which is a good thing as well, because you see a lot of fighters are able to go to different gyms to get different outlooks on things. Like there's some gyms that have like very good grapplers and other gyms that have better strikers. So guys are able to kind of go about and get a more variety of sparring partners. But it's also evident that Scotland don't have many fighters at the highest level. Like especially when you compare them to the likes of England and especially Ireland's doing over in Bellator. So what adjustments do you think need to be made in the Scottish scene for us to catch up to the rest of the world?
So I think for me, and I don't know how popular this opinion is, but I've always been quite vocal about it, right? I think Scottish MMA scene is too small for us to be kind of fractured off from each other, right? So our guys majoritively fight down south, right? So the majority of our guys are amateurs. So we had an established amateur and pro team, and when we moved unit, just a couple of things happened, and we basically started afresh with it, right? So Davey retired by that point, we basically started afresh. So the vast majority of our guys are amateur and they're coming through in their amateur career now, right? And we fight down south majoritively. We take a lot of opportunities down south, even things like Fight Star Interclub, for example. I don't know if you've been to that before.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's a phenomenal setup. Do you know what I mean? Like, we just do not have anything close to that in Scotland. And as you say, like Scottish MMA, that there really aren't, in the grand scheme of things, right? There really is not that many of us. And I think for me personally, I would love to see more collaboration between the clubs. So rather than looking at like, I don't know, I'll use, I don't know, right, an MMA team in Scotland, right? Rather than looking at them as Ross Houston's guys, right? So rather than looking at them and going, right, okay, we could potentially be fighting them, go, right, okay, there's training opportunities. The way that they do, particularly in around the sort of Midlands area of England, like you've got like Roughhouse, all that kind of stuff, right? Will Slayer, Calbon, that was the whole point. It was like pros from other gyms all trained together in these environments, but they still had their home teams. Do you know what I mean? And I would love to see us kind of have like a mini model of that, so to speak, where we did have more interclubs, we did have more sort of friendly sparring. Like when we are meeting other Scottish fighters on the scene, it's not in a cage for the first time. That might happen later on, but I would love to be meeting each other on the mats at a friendly interclub. I would love to be meeting each other on the mats at an organised grappling day. Do you know what I mean? And I think, to be fair, there's been a lot more open mats pre-COVID, obviously, that have come up in the last couple of years, which is great, really, really good, valuable experience. But I think in terms of MMA, I'd love to see a bit more of a collaboration where the Scottish teams have kind of all got each other's backs. There's always going to be rivalries, of course they are. Like it's by nature a competitive sport. You're going to have competitive people. Do you know what I mean? But I'd love to see that a wee bit more. And it's something that Davey and I try and do with the guys is get them out to other gyms and get them out to other clubs. But it'd be really good to see like a kind of united front. And I'd do it. Like we ran MMA shows before, so like I would do it. Like, see if I knew that the interest was there and the numbers were there, I'd put it on. I'd put on something like Fight Star. Do you know what I mean? Like here in Scotland, I'd do that 100%. It's just, it's not really something that we do historically. So I would like to see more collaboration. I really do think that would make the world a difference. Ireland do it a lot. They do a lot of collaborative work. And look where they are. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and I think a lot of the Irish stuff kind of stems from as well as if he's worked under John Kavanagh at one point. So I'm sure he's like the head coach of Team Rhino over there. He like started off originally, and like John Cavanagh shed out his back door. But I think what you're saying is exactly spot on, and I feel in Scotland, especially, like, our culture can be quite tribalistic at times, and we've also. I think that might kind of. Well, I don't know if a lot of the time it's meant, but some teams might give off the impression that it's them against the world. So I think, especially in like Scottish MMA, it's just that, oh, it's us, and we'll close our doors off to everyone else. But it's like what you were saying, like the collaboration. It worked really well with the Dinky Ninja Fight team. So at the likes of James Doolan's gym, higher level, collaborating with Guy Ramsey's Grip House and John Nicholson's D Unit in Dumbarton, like they formed a really great structure that's still there to today. So I don't know. It'd be amazing if that family could just grow and like more gyms could just join, because as you said, the scene's too small for it to be against the world.
So I think obviously, I think every gym's guilty of it, and we've been guilty of it in the past, like as you say, that kind of tribalistic mindset, especially when Davey was professional. Like, I mean, Davey's now 36 years old, right? he's a mature man, like, but back in the day, obviously, when he was an active MMA fighter, there was rivalries, and like, I mean, it's no secret that like Davey had his run-ins with some of the guys for the grip and stuff like that. Like that, people know that. Like, but I suppose sometimes it saddens me a wee bit that, like, I'll use that as an example, right? So I would love to see like an interclub, right, where it's like, so Guy and I were speaking during the pandemic, right? This is what I mean about the pandemic's been good things. It's kind of reopened communication channels. So at least we're speaking in the pandemic about something, right? Whereas before, like this kind of legacy of like there's been a rivalry between the old pros, like so Davey and like the old, like before like high level was there and that, like the old grip house pros. Because at the one time it was really just the grip. There was a team called Battlefield, and it was like Battlefield versus the grip, right? That's what it kind of was for a while. And then Battlefield closed, and all the fighters went to the grip, and Davey didn't, and whatever, right? It was like a million years ago, as far as I'm concerned. It's like water under the bridge. But I think sometimes, like, so that's just my personal experience, and I'm sure that other coaches, other fighters out there will have their own wee stories, and it might not be exactly like that, but they'll have like their own wee thing, like, oh, back in the day, and it kind of trickles down, do you know what I mean? And I do believe we're in like a new age MMA. Like MMA in England has just blossomed like over the last, see, amateur MMA, particularly around like Liverpool, Manchester, Bolton, see that area, like it's just saturated with like amateur fighters, and they're at a good, decent level. And as I say, like you've got those kind of, so we train over David used to train with Paul Daly quite a lot. They were training partners at Rough House. So like we still go down to Paul's and stuff, and Paul obviously he's still active, but a lot of his teammates at the time are retired, but they still all meet up and train and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's nice to see that kind of positive side of it, but I would also love to see any kind of water under the bridge. It's just done, right? And it's about the amateurs now. Like Davey's retired, right? He's gone. So he's gone. He's just coaching now. Do you know what I mean? So it's about the young people in front of us. So I as you say, I think everyone can be a wee bit tribalistic. And as I say, hands up, we've done it in the past as well. And like whatever, like it's a million years ago. Like it's time to just draw a line under it. And I'm sure other people, if they have a wee look internally, they'll be like, actually, I've done that as well. Do you know what I mean? I think we all have. Like, so I would love to see a wee bit more kind of collaboration in terms of that. But I also understand as well, like by nature, the sport's competitive. Like it is. Like people are going to be like, right. Do you know what I mean? So I'd like to see. I think something for me would be like kind of more sparring between the clubs and stuff like that. That would be really good to see. It'd be a good opportunity for folks. Like we try and take our guys out to as many clubs as we possibly can, and I take them out to all disciplines. So it's not just MMA. Like for example, last Sunday I had them over at a boxing gym in Hamilton, and they've got an outside ring, so you can spar outside, obviously. So I had them all out sparring last Sunday in a boxing gym in Hamilton. Obviously, I'm quite heavily involved in striking, so like a hand in this kind of semi-pro world of boxing and stuff like that. So I'll take them out there, or like 2 other gyms or whatever. And we encourage our guys to travel as well. So we are very much like, it's an open door policy, like go and train in other places. That's super important for your improvement as an athlete. Like, really fortunate I've got to train in places like Bali and like Thailand, stuff like that. But yes, it's beautiful, but some of the stuff I've learned over there has been super, super important to bring back here. And we always say to our guys, go and do it, go and train with the clubs. And I think I'd love to see something like that. I'd love to see that in a club where people can have their own identities, and like if you want to keep it teams, like separate teams, great, that's fine, but it's friendly fire. You can get that wee bit of competition in, but at the end of the day, it's working towards that bigger goal of improving the amateurs in Scottish MMA and ultimately producing better professionals, which is going to produce a higher level in the sport. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of grassroots stuff. So that'd be good. I think we looked at IMAF, because obviously they've got the kind of tournament format set up where you can go out with an amateur team, but it's actually quite expensive for an athlete to do it. So see, for an amateur athlete, it's actually really expensive for them. I could see how that would be a challenge. Like, so even looking at some of my guys, I was like, that's like, we'll help our guys out any way we can, and that includes financially. But like, there's a limit. Like, I mean, one of the tournaments, I think, by the time you got like over there and your flights and stuff, you're looking at like over £1,000. So that's a barrier. It's a great idea in theory, but actually there's like monetary barriers there. So it's like, maybe can we make it a wee bit more localized? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe people wouldn't agree with me, but I'd love to see that. I'd love to see just a bit more, seeing all the amateurs come together on the same mats in a friendly environment. That'd be really good.
No, I think what you're saying there, it makes a lot of sense, and to a degree there is proof in the pudding, because there's the professional fighter Chris Duncan. That's essentially what he does. He likes to travel around all the different gyms, and we're seeing like the benefits that's having on him. He's undefeated now fighting a Bellator, and hopefully will be a world champion over there. So
absolutely. It's something that David done a lot as well in his pro career. Like, so he trained at, he used to go down and train at Calbon, Wolfslayer, trained at Roughhouse as well, I'm sure. And then he represented the Phuket top team as well. So he used to go out there, train out there. So he'd come back and fight like in home soil, but under the banner of the Phuket top team, like stuff like that. And the benefit, not just the benefit in terms of what it did for his actual career, but the longevity of MMA. Like, so for example, we now, those contacts for him have like served a purpose massively. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's helped put certain clubs on the maps and all that kind of stuff. So like, I think for the greater sport, there's a lot to be done for it, like traveling around. And with the amateurs, I don't think you need to be going far and wide. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's great to be going down south, and we do it. Like, we go down south with the guys. As I say, we're big ad. We go to the Fight Star Inter Club. I really like that because it feels like a show. Yes, it's Inter Club rules, but it's like there's like 500 people there. They're all watching you. Like, grappling there, MMA there, striking there, kids over there. Like, it feels, you've got a corner team, you've got someone you've never seen before standing opposite you. it feels, it looks, it walks, it talks like a show, right? It feels good. But I really like it as well because you're getting access to literally hundreds of other amateur fighters in this compressed period of time. Do you know what I mean? So it's a really positive thing, and I would love to see, I'd love there to be something like that in Glasgow, or not just in Glasgow, in Scotland. I think it'd be really, really cool. I know one of the universities up north sometimes do something similar, but I definitely think we don't need to go far and wide, but I think we could pull our resources a wee bit better. And that's myself as well. Like, I'm not saying this to other people, like, you need to do better. I'm talking about me here, like, I need to do better. Do you know what I mean? It's a joint effort. It's not, oh, I think other people should do this. It's, you know what, I should probably do this and get my finger out.
Because we've kind of touched on this throughout the whole interview, but this is something that I'd like to kind of like nail down as a question. So how important do you feel like MMA gyms are play in the role of like developing communities?
For us, so I can only speak for personal experience, right? But for us, huge, absolutely huge. So part of what we do is I touched on earlier, like, we're really fortunate to have, we're in a residential area, right? So there's hundreds of kids here. Maryhill, Summerston, it's a pretty deprived area, right? I live in Maryhill. It's a great place. It's a fantastic community, right? Maryhill's been great to us, but there is no doubt about it. It has its social challenges, right? It does, no doubt about it. One of the big things we did when we moved from quite an affluent area, so we were Charing Cross, right? So we were kind of the fancy side of it, to here, which is, me and Davey are both the schemes, so I felt like moving back home. But when we moved kind of back here, we wanted to really focus on growing out the kids proposition, because it's exactly that. It's, everyone says it's the old adage, like, giving the kids something to do. But I think there has to be like weight behind that saying, like, genuinely creating a community-based hub for them that's accessible, right? So I don't just mean accessible in terms of times and dates. I mean financially accessible as well. So making sure that, like, for example, for us, uniforms aren't mandatory, right? I know most kids' martial art clubs are like, right, you need to buy the uniform and, like, you need to get the wee gi before they even start, right? Not mandatory, right? In fact, we go so far as to sponsor certain kids who maybe need that wee bit of additional support, right? Pre-COVID, there was always gloves to borrow. Now, unfortunately, that's gone for everyone, isn't it? Like, you need to buy your own gloves. But there was always equipment. It's like, it's a £5 a session. It's, you're not locked in. There's no contracts. There's no obligation to, like, come at the same time or the same night every week or anything like that. It's drop in, pay as you go, £5 a go. If you can make it this week and you can't make it for 2 months, that's fine. Your child is still welcome. Do you know what I mean? So that was really important for us, was like breaking down some of the social barriers with it. Like, because like, I remember when I was young, I remember when I first started out in karate, I was like the very last person to get my gi, right? So everyone in the class had their gis, right? And I was like the very, very last person to get my gi. And then when I got my yellow belt, rather than it being a belt, it was like they basically just, they put tabs on it, right? And that's kind of what they did back then. So I remember like pure love in a sport, but also remember being in a situation where my parents weren't flush. Like, my mum and my stepdad John didn't have that kind of money. Do you know what I mean? So it was like always doing their best to make sure we had. But I know for a fact things like, for example, in traditional martial arts, like a lot of the kind of the programs for them is like you have to have the gi, you pay a monthly fee, they have to do a grading, and they have to do that every 8 weeks or whatever. And see, when you start doing that, you just start putting barrier upon barrier upon barrier of people actually accessing this. So that was one big thing for us, and I'm really glad we took that approach with it, because it really blossomed. As I say, it's very successful in here with the kids. Like, we've got, I think, 16 kids classes a week, and they all take place before 6 o'clock. So they don't eat into like adult time, like kind of after work time, but they all take place before 5 p.m, 6 p.m. And we've got, as I say, we've got 2 floors, so I have to get 20 kids on the mats on each floor, 2 coaches, 1 coach to every 10 kids. So 4 coaches in total, 40 kids in total over 2 floors, and that's 16 times a week. And I'm really, really, really grateful for it. I think it's wonderful. But I know also from first-hand experience that those classes aren't just a start and stop for that kid. There are multiple families out there that have actually tapped into our services, or additional services, I should say, from us through bringing the kids to martial arts. So I mentioned earlier on, like, we do some sponsor work. Me and David do quite a bit of kind of pro bono work in the community with kids who maybe are facing extra challenges for whatever reason, right? So we have a wee programme called Little Heroes. And up until very recently, it's been completely dependent on basically us taking money out of the business and putting it back in and doing sort of pro bono work. And it goes back to that like pay it forward thing I was talking about earlier. Like, people have been good to us in the past, so we want to pay that forward. And we deal with kids who all walks of life, all different challenges, like, and not mentioning anyone in particular, but we have dealt in the past with kids who have maybe struggled with certain learning difficulties, or maybe social difficulties, maybe they're in care or whatever it is, right? And as I say, like, there's all these barriers, right? So when you break them down, you give that kid a safe space. All our coaches, our kids coaches, we do a lot of work with like trauma-informed stuff. So they're all trauma-informed. Davey works in the schools, so he's actually like contracted by Glasgow City Council. And he teaches the range wrestling, like him and Sean. So Sean Keogh's a wrestling coach, and they go out and they teach the kids wrestling. So see all the kids, like me, the kid who was getting chucked out of class all the time, right? Some of the primaries out there, rather than forcing that kid to sit at a desk and be like, you need to learn this way, they're like, okay, that's clearly not working for them. What can we do that's different? Wrestling. And Davey goes out and teaches these kids wrestling. And it's all kind of like, I'm not doing it justice, right? It's quite a delicate, trauma-informed situation. But I mean, there you go. That's within the local community that he's doing that, and the greater kind of community as well within Glasgow. And here for us, when some of these kids get access to our services, not only are you enriching that wee one's life and giving them a better environment, but you're also giving their guardian or their parent or their carer that little bit of respite as well, like that little bit of support, that little bit of someone to lean on. Sometimes just someone to say to you, listen, I think you're doing a great job there. Like, I think you're doing a really good job with such and such. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's something we're really heavy on, is the community aspect of it. And we've worked quite closely with a local charity here called G20 Youth Festival. They also have the Children's Wood, which is aimed at younger ones. But again, we went out and did work for them as well. They're just down the road with some of the younger ones, like 11, 12, 13, 14, and it's like a community hub for them. We taught them boxing, and it's resulted in them installing a boxing. They've got a boxing ring in their youth club now, right? Like stuff like that. But I think it's so important, because let's face it, like, take boxing, it's always been like a working man sport, hasn't it? Like, every scheme you go to has got a boxing gym, right? And there's a reason why. That's because it's a story as old as time, like. And I don't think MMA should be any different. Like, MMA should be open to everyone, and it should, for me, it should be a pillar of your community. That's something that's really important to both Davey and I, is making sure that people have been really good to us, people have looked after us, and it's important to us that we look after our environment and the people around about it. If it was me, I'd have an MMA gym in every town. And then with the punters as sparring partners.
But I think that would be amazing if you had an MMA gym in most towns. I think it would reduce a lot of the issues that young people face,
Totally.
especially like the likes of bullying. Like if a lot more young people had a more positive outlet for their anger, because obviously we don't know what's going on in a young person's home life, so they might go into school and take that out on people at school. If they had more MMA gyms, more boxing gyms, more Muay Thai gyms,
100%.
then
100%, definitely. It's something. So, do you know? All joking aside, Davey would be a great person to speak to about this because he specialises in this area.
Yeah.
And he can talk about it a lot more eloquently than I can, and in a lot more in depth. So that's what he kind of focuses on now. So he focuses on the fight team and the kids' youth side of things, and he works specifically with kind of like trauma-based practice. Because he's got experience in it firsthand. Like,
absolutely.
the wee kids, see the kids he works with, he was that kid. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's his story. So he would probably be a really good person to like catch up with and have a wee chat about. He could really deep dive into that and do it a lot more justice than what I can. But I like point blank right now, I can tell you, I genuinely believe that I think we're missing a trick seeing schools. So like see in America, you know how like they're massive in their sport in schools. And don't get me wrong, it needs to be balanced. It can't go too far that way because then some people aren't good at sport, you know what I mean? But I do genuinely believe that we are missing a trick within the kind of communities and like the school communities and stuff for younger kids. Sport is very much an afterthought. Well, it was for me when I was at school. We've got a wee fella and it is for him as well. Like, it's not, he's not, so take David Jr. for example, like, he's never, ever going to be the kid that sits in maths and he's like, right, okay, I love this makes perfect sense to me. He's going to be the kid that sits there and throws rubbers at his pal, and his pal throws rubbers back at him, right? He's not geared up that way. But I tell you right now, if you said, right, okay, we're going to cut your math class in half, right? So you're going to do half the amount of maths. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you, in that time, the stuff that you genuinely need to take you through life, right? So that you're not illiterate, you understand the stuff that you need, right? And then see when we come to the specialised stuff, like equations and stuff like that, we're going to scrap that. And see, during that time, you get to do wrestling. I'm telling you right now, he would blossom in that environment. Like, that's just the way he's geared up. And there's kids all over Scotland, there's kids all over the world like that. And I genuinely believe that we are missing a trick with, I think it's adding to social problems. Because if you say you had a kid, right, as you say, that's got a difficult life at home, let's say it's home life, and they're able to go in and they really enjoy wrestling, let's say wrestling, and they go in and they get to wrestle, and actually that wrestling is what gives them the passport to whatever it is, higher education, coaching, whatever it is, right? They're gradually kind of clawing their way out of that. Whereas if you've got the kid who's got a really difficult home life, even football, for example, right? Football, we've got a really difficult home life. All they love doing is playing football because they're out the house, it's escapism, it's mindful. When they go to school, it's just someone else telling them what to do. They can't be engaged because their home life's not good, right? And it's just this bad circle. Whereas if you just balance that out by going, right, that kid excels in football, that's where they're happy, that's where their struggles are. Let's do more of that. I genuinely think it would solve a lot of problems. Genuinely, like, I don't know, I could be wrong, but
no, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. And even in a more kind of general route, like getting involved in sport for young people is so important because it teaches you certain life skills that you might not learn otherwise. Like learning that you're not always going to win, like not everything's going to go your way. So let's say, see when a young person goes through school and they go for that first job interview and they don't get it. A lot of young people can't deal with that, and it absolutely demolishes their self-esteem because they've never had to cope with setbacks before in their life. Whereas you'll know better than anyone, like sport, a lot of it's setbacks. You don't always win. Sometimes you go into sparring and get battered.
Aye.
You're injured. You can't go back. Can't go back for a couple of weeks, and you just need to keep mentally prepared. And
teaches that level of resilience, doesn't it? Like, so it teaches you how to keep going even in the face of adversity, or like learn a lot of smart lessons from it. Like, you hear a lot of like adults, like, so I'm a millennial, right? I'm in that generation. And you hear a lot of like, you see all the memes and stuff, and it's like millennials and their self-care and stuff like that, right? But that's something that we weren't really taught as kids. So we weren't taught that as kids. We weren't taught that actually looking after yourself sometimes is like taking a break, right? Or is sometimes looking after yourself is pushing through something when it's difficult. So now we supposedly got this pure generation of people, right, who are trying to learn these life skills at the age of like mid to late 20s to early 30s. They're trying to catch up with that. Whereas sport teaches you all that. Sport teaches you, like, you know yourself, right? I guarantee you, anyone listening out there has done this, right? You roll your ankle, right? And then you maybe, if it's bad enough, you maybe tape it up and just stay off it for a few days. As soon as you can bear weight on it, you're back, you're training, you're doing a wee bit of this, wee bit of that. Next thing you know, you're back into full training, but you never rehab it, right? And then because you never rehab it, it goes again. And then you do that a couple of times and it goes more frequently because it's never getting fully healed. It's damaged even more before you finally sit down and go, I should have looked after this for day one. I should have rehabbed this from day one. And if I did rehab it, I wouldn't be looking at having 6 weeks out. I'd have maybe had a couple of days out and I'd be probably back up to full strength now. That's a lesson that the majority of fighters have learned, right? You learn it from making that mistake and then you learn to rehab your injuries, right? Obviously, that's like an actual physical example, but sport teaches you these things. Sport teaches you like how to learn from your mistakes, because everyone makes them. Like, everyone makes mistakes. Like, everyone has times where they fall down, or like, as you say, they don't win, like, or maybe they actually should have won. That's a big one that fighting teaches you, especially semi-pro boxing. Like, it's a bit of a toss of the coin sometimes with semi-pro boxing, depending on the judges. Like, sometimes you should have won and you didn't. You know what I mean? That's a hard lesson to learn. And I genuinely believe that if sports were valued a bit more, starting with school, because like school's a social construct of like communities, isn't it, for young kids? Like, that's the hub. So that's where learning is done. And I genuinely believe that if schools were able to take on a little bit more of a holistic approach to sports, rather than it being an extracurricular activity or PE, something we do twice a week to keep fit, and actually move that mindset, I believe that, well, I know from myself that would help go some way to help kind of like balance out some of the social problems kids are having out with school. And as I say, just producing more balanced, better equipped folk at dealing with stuff. And it doesn't have to be fighting, it can be anything. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be fighting, like, it could be whatever. But I think sport is very much an afterthought. I think it's very much an afterthought in education just now, and I do think we could do better. I think the education system could do better in equipping kids as well for it. So I don't know how I got into that.
So we'll go on to the last question of the day, and this is one it's always the most difficult to answer, because
Oh no.
you know yourself, like running a gym, you don't know what tomorrow is going to look like, never mind what 10 years is going to look like. So where do you see New Life MMA in 10 years' time?
Oh, that is a hard one. So we've got Davey and I, I'd love to see, hopefully by that time, the amateurs that we've got just now will be well established in their pro careers. They may even 10 years be coming to the end of their pro careers, right? Getting to the point where they're transitioning over to whatever else it is they want to do. I'd definitely love to have a couple of gyms, and this is no secret. Davey and I are actually in the process of kind of planning for this further down the line, not 10 years time, a little bit quicker than that. But we would love what I spoke about there, about having access and pulling down the barriers for people socially. We'd love to have a wee network of kids' gyms throughout, well, we'll say Glasgow, but I mean, dream big, like, but we'd love to have a network of youth gyms and kids' gyms, and kind of catching kids when they're young. It's going to benefit the sport massively, do you know what I mean? And you've seen that down south now. The juniors that are coming through down south, some of them are phenomenal, like especially in the jiu-jitsu scene. So I'd love to see that, love to see us having a bit more in terms of youth and juniors, starting to feed food for the next generation. My guys who are with me now, I hope by that point they have had a long and prosperous professional career. They're all world champs. But on a personal level, I don't know, man, like, me and Dave are still young at that point. Like, I'll only be 43, Dave will be 45, so I don't know, it's hard to say. Maybe in Bali, I don't know. Maybe you like gym in Bali. I think for us, we definitely want to support and continue to grow out the fight team and help those guys achieve everything that they want and aspire to achieve, and be where they want to be. That's super important for us. And then the other side would be the youth, so the kids and the youth, because that's also super important to us as well. And hopefully still here in Maryhill, definitely. This place has been great to us, so we're not moving. This will be headquarters.
You spoke about having quite a big amateur fighters there. Is there anyone in particular that we should be looking out for, or any of your fighters just to keep an eye on for the future?
Oh, I can't name one of them, but what I'll say then is
as many as you think. You can remember.
I'll give you a couple of boys who are matched actually already. So we have a couple of boys fighting on Evolution of Combat in Kilmarnock on
in that, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Yeah. So it's Dan Hope that runs it. It's a really, really good show. If anyone's, obviously can't have crowds just now, but if anyone's on the fence about going to it when they can, you should. It's a great show. There's always really good matchups from a professional point of view as well. Like, Dan and his colleague are a dream to deal with. He's obviously a very experienced professional himself. Do you know what I mean? It's fair, it's transparent. Like, it's a good show. So we've got Thomas Callahan matched. He's matched on that. He is out for a wee bit of redemption. He lost his last bout. So a lot of learning has happened from that, a lot of big lessons, and we always say this to the guys, like, we don't match our fight team with like walkthroughs. There's no point, right? Like, there isn't, and I understand, especially when like bigger organisations are looking for, like, I think back in the day, especially like when you used to have to like audition for like Bellator, it was all about, you had to get scouted, and it was like you had to have like a substantially positive record to be part of it. And I think they've moved away from that now, but I always say to the guys, like, there's no point padding your record, like, especially amateur. Like, what is the point? Like, amateur is when, you said it yourself, kids need to learn how to lose, fighters need to learn how to lose as well. You need to learn how to lose, right? So Tommy's on a redemption course for that one. We also have Todd Milne fighting as well. He fought on top, the last on top just before lockdown. He's coming off the back of a win there. I have Stephen Hume fighting. He's coming off a 2-year break from the cage. He's currently 2-0. So he's coming off a 2-year break. And fingers crossed, and maybe I'll do a wee shout out for this. I have one of the very few flyweights in Scotland, and he's a nightmare to get matched. So we are hoping that Lee Ferguson, he's coming off a win at Evolution of Combat at the last outing. He's hoping to go 4-1 this time out, but we are desperately seeking an opponent for Leroy. There are few flyweights, there's hardly any in Scotland, like I think literally a couple, and there's very few overall in the UK. So if you have a true flyweight, I'm not looking for bantamweight, I'm looking for a real flyweight, because that's what he is, please let us know. But you'll definitely be seeing him anyway. He's a character. So yeah, so those guys are all matched. In MMA, we've got some striking fights coming up as well, but we'll keep it MMA, seeing as it's an MMA podcast.
Is Evolution of Combat, is that getting live streamed? No?
It is, it's pay-per-view. Yeah,
Oh,
it's pay-per-view. It's behind closed doors, this event, I'm sure. I'm sure it's still behind closed doors. I think so, I double check that just in case he's trying to sell tickets, and I'm like, no, you can't get a ticket. The last one was certainly. The last one was behind closed doors, and it's the same venue. So he did pay-per-view the last time. But it's always, I definitely think Evolution of Combat's like up there with one of the best shows in Scotland just now. Obviously, they're between here and Morecambe. But every single time I've been to it, it's been genuinely good quality fights, like good 50-50 fights. He's got the grappling side of it as well. He puts on some grappling stuff. So it's, I'm sure it's the 7th of August. Have a wee look.
I think you're right, actually, because I know Reese, and I've seen a lot of his stuff. Because the last one, that was headlined by Scott Malone, who's literally just Cage Warriors again. So it's showing you that they're getting there.
So that was the last one that was behind closed doors. So it's the same venue again. So I'm assuming it'll be pay-per-view. So fingers crossed.
No, and all the best for all your fighters. I'm sure they'll be amazing, and hopefully Lee can get a match, because that must be the worst thing. Like, you really just can't get it.
It's the same at pro as well. Like Gary Priestley, obviously he's 57 as well, so it's the same at pro. It's sometimes they need to give up. They need to give up the weight. Do you know what I mean? But ideally, if I can have it, I would rather match him. He is a true 57. He doesn't do any massive cuts or anything like that. Like he is a 57. So sometimes they're coming to me and like they walk at like 66. They're cutting to fly, and I'm like, nah, man, Lee, like Lee's a 57. So if you have anyone, he's not fussy. He's game as hell. He's relatively experienced. He's had a few stand-up fights as well, so he's not a novice. I'll take anyone. Come and see me if you can.
But that's been great, Jill. Thanks very much for your time, as always.
Not at all. Thank you, Martin.
It's very appreciated. Do you have any social medias that you just want to shout out just before we sign off?
Yeah, just New Life Gym Glasgow for pretty much everything. So Instagram, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. You'll catch us there. It's updated pretty regularly.
Thanks very much, and thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you later.